Good afternoon, Eastern Washington and fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Brought to you once again by On Fire Ministries and the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story. And the news behind the news, not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. About our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ, and about not ending in prayer, but moving to action. And it's about the gospel of the kingdom, Zechariah 2:5. But I, declares the Lord, will be a wall of fire to her on all sides, and I will be the glory in her midst. Encouraging word today is very simply this. Evangelism is spreading like wildfire throughout the United States of America, and we are seeing some pretty amazing things. Hundreds, thousands of people giving their lives to Jesus Christ. And this Friday, Chris Overstreet and Compassion Action, one of the greatest evangelists of our time, at least in the United States of America, is going to be here in Spokane, Washington, Friday, 10 a.m. He's going to be doing evangelism training, and they're going to be sending evangelism teams out. And you, raise your hand. If you're a Christian, you're an evangelist. So join us on Friday at 10 a.m. Also Saturday at 10 a.m. We're going to be doing the same thing, evangelism training, and we're going to be sending teams out throughout all of Spokane with the mini gospel truck to a bunch of different places. And we're going to see Spokane lit on fire for Jesus Christ. Now, I want to also mention that 6 o'clock on Saturday night, we're going to be doing worship open air right here at On Fire Ministries with Compassion to Action, baptisms, and a whole bunch of ministry time. But some of you may have missed Friday, the day before, at 7 p.m. We're also going to be doing worship and ministry and sending out evangelism teams at night in downtown Spokane. And we actually do this regularly, but some people may not be used to it. If you can make either one or both, please join us to see Spokane transformed into a kingdom for his glory and honor and praise. In Jesus' name. Now, the encouraging word I also want to impart to you is this. In the recent elections locally in the primary, God-fearing candidates, 7 of 9 won. And we are seeing a transformation, not just with people on an individual level. We're also seeing a community transformation as the community begins to elect leaders who are God-fearing patriots. So if you haven't registered to vote, make sure you do so. And I want to just share a couple of statistics. The largest voting bloc in America are Christians, and the largest voting bloc in America that is not registered to vote are Christians, and the largest voting bloc that is registered to vote but that doesn't vote are, you guessed it, Christians. So if we show up, we actually see God work through us to transform society back into a peace, prosperity, loving place. Not what we're seeing right now with our waking eyes. And if you know something's wrong, ask yourself, what happened 50 years ago? What was different? And the answer is very simple. There was a bold preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and many Americans are realizing that it's time to get back to those fundamental principles made and are making America great again. I do want to mention a little-known provision in the Washington State Constitution, Article 1, Section 32, says that there must be a frequent recurrence to fundamental principles in order to ensure freedom continues the next generation. That's a paraphrase. Go take a look at it for yourself. What are those fundamental principles? Those fundamental principles are unalienable rights, the idea that God is sovereign, there is no king but Jesus. Those fundamental principles offend some people, but it doesn't make them less true. And it doesn't mean that we also have to be silent in the face of all these things that are happening out there, because Jesus said to worship in the Spirit and in truth. It takes both. And that brings us now to a great video. I know it's a promo video, but Compassion to Action really glorifies Jesus in everything they do. Chris Overstreet and his brother Tim, they glorify Jesus in every single thing that they do. And apparently we don't have that ready to roll yet. So I'm just going to go next to your daily intelligence briefing. On the international front, we're first going to start with the globalists. From Technocracy News, central bank gold demand soars to new all-time high. Well, the largest gold holdings of the top 6 central banks in the world, the United States, Germany, Italy, France, the Russian Federation, and China. Well, that's interesting. Gold is not dead. These central banks love gold and are positioning for a post-capitalist, post-Great Reset world. All told, central banks hold more than 35,000 tons, or about 1/5 of all the gold ever mined. So do they know something that we don't? I find that interesting, especially in the wake of the beginning of central bank digital currencies, even here in the United States with Fed Now. This just underscores that we need to return back to sound money. And there are several ways to do this. Sound money is what ensures freedom. That brings us to the next article from Technocracy News. Aussie Intel Agency funds research to merge human brain cells with artificial intelligence because, of course, what could go wrong with that? This is known, if you have never heard this before, maybe you're new to Patriot Radio. This is known as transhumanism. This is the idea of mixing AI, robotics with humanity. This is what was put out with Star Trek and the Borg, so that these people believe they can live forever. They're going to cheat death. Well, it's not true. They're not going to. But the issue here really is, do we want this kind of connection to a government or a banking system that may withhold our funds just because we believe differently or we speak differently, may try to control what we see and believe? That's already happening. It's called activity-based intelligence, if you've never heard it. The idea of creating profiles on every single human being to such an extent that they can introduce stimulus and get you to behave a certain way because they know you better than you know yourself. Well, this is all part of that. And again, no thank you. Now, I don't know if we have the Yuval Noah Harari video up yet, but if we do, Travis, we're going to do this probably every show. I want you to hear from their own mouths. I want you to hear what they really say. Now, last show, Yuval Noah Harari essentially said he believes that he is a god. And it's so fascinating because you go back to the Old Testament and even in the New Testament with the Greeks and the Romans, it was this idea that people thought they could become gods. And here Yuval Noah Harari, the brains, if you will, behind the World Economic Forum, is just coming out and straight up saying it. All right, we're going to move to China. Coming from Open Source Intelligence, the newly released BlackBerry Global Threat Intelligence Report has noted a 40% quarterly increase in cyber attacks on government and public service organizations, described as a sudden surge by researchers. The report found that 11.5 attacks per minute occurred from March through May. Russia and North Korea increased their attack tempo in this time period, primarily targeting the U.S., South Korea, and Japan. Now, I thought you said we were talking about China. We are. Wait for it. The Russians and the Chinese, coming to us from the Epoch Times, had an unprecedented joint show of force within miles of Alaska. And it's very clear, at least right now, that they're using each other to prepare for some kind of war in the Pacific. They're using each other to attack adversaries in the cybersphere and also to intimidate them on the high seas. Which brings us to the next thing, and that is China has blocked efforts by the Philippines to resupply troops on its disputed shoal in the South China Sea. Now, this has already been ruled in international law that the Philippines has rights over this place. Now, it's called the Second Thomas Shoal, but that really doesn't even matter. What matters is that the Philippines has a ship that they ran aground there, and they have a marine contingent on this ship that they keep resupplying. Well, the Chinese now are trying to actively and intentionally block resupply efforts of this ship. Now, the United States Coast Guard is sending Coast Guard vessels, some have already arrived, to the Pacific to guard coastal waters of places like the Philippines and Papua New Guinea. So what this means is there is a flashpoint coming in the near future. And by the way, China is intentionally trying to do this. So one more indicator of looming war in the Pacific. And that brings us to AND Magazine. The FBI knew in 2018 Chinese intelligence was in contact with the Bidens, and DOJ buried the evidence. Okay, I'm going to paint this in a little bit different light. If you knowingly bury evidence of espionage, or some might call it giving comfort to our enemies by burying evidence of espionage, that needs to be held accountable. And I would argue, if this really was that intentional, that's treason, without any question. If you know of a breach of U.S. security by Chinese intelligence, and you intentionally bury it because of the name that's associated with it, instead of doing the right thing in counterintelligence, then you have just aided and abetted what was happening. And this needs to be held accountable. This is an incredible, incredible story. And again, you can read that, Sam Faddis, AND Magazine. Now that brings us back to Yuval Noah Harari and the globalists. This is what they really believe. This is what they really think from their own mouths. Travis, roll the clip.
And remember that we humans, we never really have direct access to reality. We are always cocooned by culture, and we always experience reality through a cultural prism. Our political views are shaped by the stories of journalists and by the anecdotes of friends. Our sexual preferences are tweaked by movies and fairy tales. Even the way that we walk and breathe is subtly nudged by cultural traditions. Now, previously, this cultural cocoon was always woven by other human beings. Previous tools like printing presses, or radios, or televisions, they helped to spread the cultural ideas and creations of humans, but they could never create something new by themselves. A printing press cannot create a new book. It's always done by a human. AI is fundamentally different from printing presses, from radios, from every previous invention in history, because it can create completely new ideas.
So you hear that he is trying to replace the creator with the creation. Go ahead, roll.
It can create a new culture. And the big question is, what will it be like to experience reality through a prism produced by a non-human intelligence, by an alien intelligence? Now, in the first few years, AI will probably largely imitate the prototypes, the human prototypes that fed it in its infancy.
So what he wants to do here is he wants to set the stage for saying, the first few years is going to be kind of innocent. It's going to just imitate things that are already in existence, make them maybe a little bit better. But wait, there's more.
But with each passing year, AI culture will boldly go where no human has gone before. So for thousands of years, we humans basically lived inside the dreams and fantasies of other humans. We have worshipped gods, we pursued ideals of beauty, we dedicated our lives to causes that originated in the imagination of some human poet or prophet or politician. Soon, we might find ourselves living inside the dreams and fantasies of an alien intelligence. And the danger that this poses, or the potential danger, it also has positive potential, but the dangers this poses are fundamental, very, very different from everything or most of the things imagined in science fiction movies and books.
Now wait for this. He is going to try to justify sin. Go ahead.
Previously, people have mostly feared the physical threat that intelligent machines pose. So the Terminator depicted robots running in the streets and shooting people. The Matrix assumed that to gain total control of human society, AI would first need to get physical control of our brains and directly connect our brains to the computer network. But this is wrong. Simply by gaining mastery of human language, AI has all it needs in order to cocoon us in a matrix-like world of illusions. Contrary to what some conspiracy theories assume, you don't really need to implant chips in people's brains in order to control them or to manipulate them. For thousands of years, prophets and poets and politicians have used.
He just admitted the purpose of this is to manipulate people. You heard it from his own mouth. So what they want to do is they want to justify sin. In other words, create a new value system under AI. So you can't blame it on a human being. You can't attack the human being for being immoral. It's AI that's doing it. It's okay to do whatever you want to do. And oh, by the way, we don't need to have anything in your mind implanted to manipulate you. Again, no thank you. End of story. And that brings us next to Russia, Ukraine. Britain's Home Secretary said over the weekend that Iran's Revolutionary Guard is bringing and becoming much more aggressive, and that the Iranian threat is what worries us most. Now, the reason I bring this up, this is also the Middle East, but the reason I bring this up is because the Iranians are who are funding and who are sending drones to Russia and who are funding some of the back channel economy of Russia. Now, the United Kingdom is saying that the IRGC has attempted at least 15, listen to this, 15 assassinations or kidnappings of people in the UK over the last 18 months. But Britain does not officially list the IRGC as a terrorist group. I don't know what else would qualify, but there you go. And that brings us to the next thing in the Middle East. Thousands of additional Marines and sailors have been sent to the Persian Gulf recently alongside F-35 and F-16 fighters, A-10 Thunderbolt planes, and an additional destroyer. They're going to the Straits of Hormuz to protect shipping there. Again, another potential flashpoint. That brings us back to Russia, Ukraine. Belarus has begun military exercises near the Suwalki Gap using tanks, heavy armor, and drones. The exercises will take place near NATO members Poland and Lithuania, both of which have increased their border security in recent weeks. And they have forward deployed massive amounts of troops in that area. Again, a flashpoint with the Wagner fighters being right nearby. From ISW, Institute for Study of War, Ukraine strikes on bridges along critical Russian ground lines of communication in southern Ukraine are part of the Ukrainian interdiction campaign focused on setting conditions for future decisive counteroffensive operations. Again, objectively speaking, the Ukrainians have been launching a lot of artillery strikes into the rear lines of the Russians and trying to cut off their lines of supply. Just 2 days ago, it was reported that they have now committed some of their reserves into a significant counteroffensive near Zaporozhye. More of that will come here in the near future. And again, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, the next month or so is going to really show what is about to happen in the next year as far as Russia, Ukraine are concerned. In other words, the next month is going to be decisive whether the counteroffensive fails or whether it succeeds and whether the Russians come to the bargaining table and whether the United States does as well. That brings us to The Guardian and the National Front. I want to talk about this. This always fascinated me in the legislature on the Environment Committee. There had always been rumors of fusion. In other words, a process that would actually produce more energy out of the process than was put into it. Well, coming to us from The Guardian, U.S. scientists at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory achieved net energy gain for the second time in nuclear fusion reactions. So nuclear fusion appears now to be a reality. That brings us also on the national front to the Biden Energy Secretary and the Western Journal. Biden's Energy Secretary quietly consulted with China days before heavily criticized move. Well, what move was that, you might ask? Well, when President Joe Biden's administration released tens of millions of barrels of oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 2021, the Communist Chinese Party heard about it before the American people did. One more little check mark of, we really should be looking into this, don't you think? There should be some sort of counterintelligence investigation, or perhaps we need to take down all of our counterintelligence infrastructure in the United States and rebuild it from the ground up. Well, you decide. Also, on the national front, coming to us from J. Michael Waller, images show armed men in tactical gear coming fast and furious over the border from Mexico. This is not one or two. The reports are dozens of military-aged males with this kind of gear coming across the southern border right now, something that we've been looking for the last 5 years to see if this would start happening. It is. And very clearly, if you're looking at this from an objective point of view, this is an extraordinarily important indicator and a precursor to a world war, that they are coming into the United States to preposition themselves to weaken the United States, to attack infrastructure and critical infrastructure inside the U.S. just before and during a world war. That brings us on the national front to a couple of political issues. Former Mike Pence advisor endorses Trump, a figure of unwavering determination. Keith Kellogg, who was the national security advisor to then Vice President Mike Pence from 2018 to January 2021, attacked his former boss as he endorsed President Trump. Well, that's no surprise. Mike Pence has not only no chance, he should never be anywhere in leadership in the United States of America again, especially since with what he knew about the 2020 elections and what country he knew was attacking the United States during that time. He did nothing. In fact, he did the opposite of nothing. He actually worked against the United States by not upholding the Constitution. That brings us to the Epoch Times. DeSantis replaces campaign manager in, I think, the third shakeup in as many weeks. Very clearly, and this might upset some folks, but again, objectively, DeSantis does not have a chance coming up. People are becoming more and more hardened in their support for President Trump, and it just continues to appear that he is the man of the hour to restore the republic. Now, we don't put our hope in a man. It's going to take all of us. It really does seem like he has been chosen for this time to expose evil in America, and more importantly, to fight against it and to make sure that it never comes back in this country again. That brings us next to technocracy news. Warfare. Cyber attack launched against hospitals across the United States of America. Cyber criminals continue to be blamed as primary actors in cyber attacks. Problem is with this, that these cyber criminals are usually funded by a nation state. So the question is, who did this? And the fact that they're attacking hospitals is another key indicator. They're moving down the line from energy and natural gas infrastructure, electrical grid, and now they're moving to hospitals. So they're testing, they're probing. The more that this happens, the closer we are coming to some sort of a flashpoint, some sort of an inflection point. And again, this all objectively looks like probing before World War III. That brings us to the Gateway Pundit. Now we have proof. Gateway Pundit exclusive, massive 2020 voter fraud uncovered in Michigan. Police find tens of thousands of fake registrations, bags of prepaid gift cards, guns with silencers, burner phones, and a Democrat-funded organization with multiple temporary facilities in several states. I hope this is at least the catalyst to do an actual and honest investigation into what happened in 2020. Coming to us from WorldNet Daily. Serious alert for U.S. elections. China owns anything that touches the Chinese internet. Well, yeah. So why are we having any kind of Chinese footprint involved anywhere in the country, let alone in our elections? Where is the counterintelligence agencies? What are they doing right now? Jihadis, military-age males coming across the border, Chinese influence operations and elite capture operations in the United States. What are they doing? And that brings us to the regional front, as we don't just pay attention to this stuff. Compassion to Action coming here to Spokane, Washington, this Friday and Saturday, the 11th and 12th of August, 10 a.m. in the morning. We're going to do training, evangelism training. We're going to send out evangelism teams and the mini gospel truck around Spokane, Washington to evangelize Spokane for Jesus Christ. If you know a pastor who wants to join us, we're going to be doing a luncheon on Friday at 12 o'clock right here at On Fire Ministries, 115 East Pacific. Look forward to seeing some pastors here for that. And 6 o'clock on Saturday night, we are going to be doing open air worship, baptisms, ministry. And on Friday night at 7 p.m., we're going to be doing the same thing, worship here as well. Please join us for some or all of it. Last year, we had hundreds and hundreds of people come through. It was an amazing time. A lot of people set free and delivered. To look forward to seeing you all then. Also, August 20th, Sean Foyt coming. Let us worship to Spokane, Washington at the Pavilion. Starts at 5 p.m. I think we had 36 ministries there last year and 6,000 people. This is the largest event of its kind in the summer in Spokane, and we look forward to seeing all of you there as we unite under one banner, the banner of Jesus Christ. And that's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that has been praying for us, and also take a moment, go to Rumble and subscribe to us. Follow us, like every post that you can, make a comment, share it with your friends and family as we get around the censorship. But it's really important to make sure to go to Rumble as we try to beat some of the other platforms that are intentionally censoring us. I think one time we had like -9 views or something like that. So clearly that stuff's happening. We want to get the truth out, and you help us to do that, and we thank you so much for that. That brings us to our guest today, one of my favorite guests, Mark Sutherland. He's a filmmaker, producer of the Iris Echo and the Sutherland Report podcast. MarkSutherland.org. Mark, it's great to have you on the show today, my friend. How are you doing?
Matt, lovely to join you from your side of the pond, my dear friend. I am very well, taking temperature in the great United States of America. So it'd be fantastic to discuss that with you.
What is the temperature right now from your perspective in the United States?
That's very interesting. I am traveling quite a way, all over the place at the moment. I'm in an undisclosed location in the great state of North Dakota. So in some ways, I feel a little bit of culture shock because North Dakota is half the size of the UK, but only has 700,000 people living in it, where the UK has 68 million people living in it and climbing, depending on how many, dinghies and boats are coming over the English Channel illegally at the moment. I'm having some interesting conversations, Matt. I'm having interesting conversations where some people are beginning to really see that there are some deep problems going on in this country. As you know, I haven't been able to be here because of the COVID-Novid mandates of stupidity. And as I refuse to take any vaccine, that means I could not cross the pond and come into America until a few weeks ago. So that's the reality of the situation. There are some people, of course, I'm talking to them who are waking up. And I say this respectfully, depending on where I am, there is also an element of, well, that a load of those issues are over there. They may not be actually seeing what is actually happening of the sort of full frontal attack that you are undergoing, that we are undergoing on the whole of Western civilization. And I don't want to end on the negative in a way, but on the other hand, there is a mixture. There are people beginning to wake up and ask those questions. The privilege of being here, and I want to say this, the privilege of being here and the privilege of being in North Dakota and at this end of the continent is that it begins to give you a different viewpoint from when you are a European in the UK, as in what happened in the Second World War, that there were many Americans, of course, that came over to the UK from this kind of culture. We may speak the same language, but our culture is vastly different. And then our perspective, your view on what's happening in the Pacific, your view of what's happening with Japan, with Russia, with China, also, we then have a slightly different perspective on that. And of course, and as I've said it to you a number of times and respectfully, that all I ask is for Americans to look beyond their border and to see the world and what's going on, to see how you have been manipulated from these exclusive politicians in Washington, etc., etc. So I suppose wrapping up at the moment, someone else called Dave Hodges has a saying that going, waking up one American mind at a time. And I feel sometimes maybe I'm doing that by having one-on-one conversations. And when you start to ask probing questions and people then start to go, yes, there is a problem. But also there is a reluctance to also discuss politics within churches, Matt, that old chestnut. Come across a little bit of that attitude, as in hearing that secondhand from a dear friend of mine who wanted to speak about the convoy in Canada. And you know how close that border is where I am. And it's, oh, no, we can't discuss politics and all that. I find that shocking because I'm not used to that. I don't mix with those people. But there are my initial thoughts.
It's interesting that sentiment still is around despite all of the evil that is happening. You know, morality and what God has given us to steward is not a political issue. It's a biblical issue. It's an issue of worldview. And really, when people say that, and I'm not trying to be intentionally edgy or offensive, but really there's an implication that you hate this country. Because if you're not willing to talk about the truth and say, that's wrong, and Jesus Christ said, I want to influence every area. I want it all. That's what Jesus Christ died for on the cross, was all, not just a little bit, not 9/10. He wanted it all. You're implying I'm going to cede this ground to I hate it. I hate this country so much. I'm going to cede this ground to it. And some people might find that offensive, but logically and reasonably, that's the implication of that position. And I'd like to get your take, being from outside of the United States. Some people here are so frustrated because for years we've been trying to talk about it, and it's the same refrain of, well, we can't get involved in politics, and people are like, we're not talking about politics, we're talking about morality, like mutilating children or kidnapping children or our education system and pornography.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely right. You just have to look at the film Sound of Freedom that's come out, and I am really gratified to hear, with discussion with various people, that people are flocking to go and see that. People are beginning to talk about a fundamentally important issue that you have touched on for a long, long time. And of course, that has issues and implications in regard to what's happening on your border in Mexico, because we look at those caravans of people and that we know that they have been established many, many countries before they have actually got to the Mexican border, and if not helped by the Democrats, etc., and through phones contact these people when you get there and all the rest. These are moral issues in that regard, and I think some people are discussing some of that, but it is taking a long time. You and I have seen pictures of Christians then reading the Bible at pride marches, etc., etc. They've been challenging the drag queen hours and all the rest, some people being arrested, but people are pushing back. Now, how many of that? Is it a small minority? Because at times we feel a small minority. We just think, how many people are speaking up and addressing these issues? But I think there is a gathering. I think there is a bit of a momentum going with certain people, Matt. I think of that, there is no doubt. And a very curious thing that's happening, even though it's not in the United States, but it's happening in Canada. Look at this, where suddenly there's a big push from the Muslim community in Canada to turn around and say, no, we're not having any of this transgender nonsense, talk to our kids. And then suddenly there seems to be an affinity with Christian groups out there, and there is this huge march and maybe convoy being established. So there's some very interesting movements happening in various parts of the world, and of course within Europe, within the UK. You know, there's been people that would class themselves definitely as Christians, as conservatives who have spoken out, and then they've been arrested, they've been deplatformed, they've been debanked. And I actually think there is an undercurrent of people that have absolutely had enough of this. But the problem is, where can they exercise that frustration? And you would quite rightly say, as we have begun the election season. No matter what anyone says, on the United States, we have begun the election season in earnest, because the lawfare is waging. And I also think, look, I'll clarify it like this, and this is my own personal experience in the UK. I didn't leave the church. I didn't leave a Bible-believing church. The church left me. It left me because it's taken the Bible and gone, we don't believe this anymore. We don't believe in this. We're not believing in the fundamentals of what Jesus has said. And some people may be offended by that, but that's the truth. That is the kind of thing that is going on over here. I just want to throw this in regard to recent things that have gone on and the implications of this. Rick Warren, a name that is known to you because of his foundation, because of, Council of Foreign Relations links, because of Davos links, etc., and basically flip-flopping about important issues. Rick Warren is now honorary chancellor of Spurgeon's College in South London in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Yeah, I've just got the reaction I thought I would from you, my dear friend, and others. It is absolutely, as we say on my side of the pond, gobsmacking. I am not surprised, but the infiltration of the social gospel, the infiltration of that kind of social outlook, e.g. not the true gospel at all, from actually changing from man's hearts inside out, but thinking it's about and changing the environment and basically taking on the social aspects of that, then this is where we're at, Matt. This is the huge cultural attack and changes that that are going on. And sadly, every single negative church experience, whether that, to me, and I'll say it, Rick Warren, the emerging church, Malcolm McLaren, and all this nonsense, and anything else that comes from a California base ends up within Europe, and people are not discerning. They are walking away from what Scripture says. They are walking away from the biblical beliefs. And I come back to it. We're looking at the state of the Church of England within the UK. I mean, it's walking away. It wants to change the Lord's Prayer and all the rest. This is the cultural war that we've got going. And you and I have said, and you particularly have said, it's a long game. This cultural war has been in the long game. And I am concerned over here, and I do understand, I can get underneath this whole thing of understanding what small town America is, what the values are, etc., etc. And I'm really imploring people to find those values again, Matt, very, very fast.
Yeah, it's just a recurrence to the fundamental principles. Actually, Article 1, Section 32 of the Washington State Constitution says there needs to be this recurrence to fundamental principles so that freedom continues in perpetuity. And right now, I think we need to just kind of hone in on this one key issue, that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. And when people are indifferent to what's going on in their schools or what's going on in their local government or what's going on even at their church, that actually is the opposite of love. And indifference is what destroys civilizations. And I do take hope, though. There are so many Americans waking up around the country, enough to create consternation of Klaus Schwab and Yuval Noah Harari and some of these other characters. They know that the clock is ticking. They know more Americans are waking up by the day. So the question for us then becomes, how can we be most effective in this use of time as the tide is turning back the other way?
And a brilliant question. And it's down to us individually and the conversations that we have in our everyday life. And very often, as you've said, that may be serving people and supporting people within their local communities, but also then bravely standing up and saying, look, I want to inform you about this. Are you aware of this? Are you aware of what is actually going on? Now, let's just take a slight different segue, which I think just illustrates something. Without naming where I am or my dear friends involved, I'm seeing Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 play out in real time. There are dear friends of mine who refuse to have a smart meter put in their house in regard to on the water supply into their house. They refuse to do it. So what happened is that the water supply was then turned off without, as we say in the UK, without a by your leave, without a warning. Then my friend has gone to a local their local town meeting to express this and said, this is wrong. And then there's denial that anyone actually went and actually expressed that opinion. Now suddenly, because there's a little bit of pushback, they're realizing, oh, well, come and talk to us. The point I'm making is this: how dare someone turn off the water supply in that particular way in the United States of America? I know that there seems to be a problem with the term monopoly, and we've got companies that have a monopoly out here. But why do people think they have the right in a small town of 130 people to turn off the water and not think that, oh my goodness me, I've got to live with my neighbours? Oh dear, right. This isn't going to create a good atmosphere for people to live in. At the end of the day, and this is where, because of land mass, I think you are the sixth biggest continent. Because of land mass, because of the way your society is built, there are small towns, you would then call them as a city council, across this continent, you all need each other. You need to be speaking to each other. You need to be supporting each other. And these kinds of actions have to stop right now. Now, this may seem a little bit naive of me, but I then go on to say, so people are not aware of the New American magazine? You're not aware of Bill Jasper? You're not aware of the John Birch Society? And I walk out sometimes in conversation shaking my head in utter disbelief, thinking you've got neighbours down the road where these kind of Agenda 21, Agenda 30 actions that go all the way back to 1992 in Kyoto. I'm sorry to sound like a sort of a boring person rattling on about these things. We know our stuff, and I'm astounded when others don't. And then I have to step back and think, Mark, don't be so naive. Our job is to desperately, in the best way we can, without being rude, without being offensive, to educate people. And this is the basic. When we're now seeing in Montana the rules about, whether you can mine there or get certain minerals out and stuff like this, people need to get together to defend their ranches, to defend the people that are raising cattle, to defend the people that are growing the food, and get out there and learn about what is going on and push back. And as you know, there are people that are far more expert than me on those issues that dear friend Dan Happel, for once, who's been bashing on, and Debbie Guadalupe have been bashing on about these issues for 20 odd years, because they are seeing it in real time. And it's been quite an eye-opener for me to be in a small town and see this. Now, this is not good. And I hope that a lot of it, I know it's playing out elsewhere across this nation, but I hope that we begin to deal with that, because, Matt, and I know I have this issue, if we're not trusting the people around us, we have got a problem. We have got to work out who we can actually trust here, and who will have, as you say on this side of the pond, who will have our backs. You have a Second Amendment for a reason. This is not to go out there and cause violence for the sake of it. It's to defend yourselves. This is not for duck shooting. But we have some serious questions to ask ourselves, and especially as we find at home, which I find rather interesting, because suddenly the Conservative government has gone, no, we're going to open up the oil fields in north of Scotland and the Shetland Islands. We're going to start digging for oil, no matter what these young group of idiots called Stop Oil on Our Streets want to do, or the green policies. People are facing this whole thing of electric cars and all the rest in the face. So I think, coming back to your brilliant question, it's how, as I had a conversation in a local grocer's 2 days ago with a young guy in there, he said, I'm concerned about this country. I'm one person. I don't know what to do. And I've got to go back in there, or my other friend has got to go back in there and say, you may be one person, but we need to link you with other people, because there is a lot that you can do. And there are some incredible young people out there who are asking themselves some very, very serious questions, and are going, well, hold on a minute. I've benefited from this country. My parents have, my grandparents have, my great-grandparents have. And I understand its history. How can I push back and stop the things that I'm seeing in front of my eyes go on? And that is down to, frankly, education. But it is literally, it seems like one person at a time, Matt. Maybe we've got to have those. We've got to have these tours more often, where we're touring around and going from state to state, taking temperature. And that is what I'm doing. And I'm having those conversations because I care about what's going on. And when I'm here, I'm able to reflect to Europe. And when I'm back home, I'm able to reflect to here. And with all the different machinations that are going on, I just feel that this is really, really important. I'm having a very, very unique experience in many ways, because I'm really trying to get under the skin and ask what your opinion is. as we are building up in regard to, as we said, the whole political feast that is unfolding in front of us.
And we got about 3 minutes left. And Travis, if you can try to bring up that J. Michael Waller post that shows these guys coming across the border. I mean, we have this now. Pictures of military-age males with clearly military weaponry coming across the southern border of the United States of America. We've talked about this on the show before about what's happening in England. What is your take looking in to America about this issue with our southern border?
Well, it's just outrageous. I mean, it's outrageous. That's why the sound an influence in here. You know, a country that is not in charge of its own borders, is not in charge of its own language, is not in charge of its own laws, is not in charge of its own money supply, you can then say is not a country anymore. This is a full frontal attack on you to make you not a country anymore, to bring people into your country that don't have an allegiance with it, do not have generations of generations of people that have been part of this country. The bottom line is that this is a disgraceful, deliberate failure. The guy who's in charge of it, or Homeland Security or whatever, Mayorkas is his name, I think. You know, I mean, the guy should be sacked. When Kamala Harris goes down there, all she can laugh is laugh like a hyena. They do not seem to care. The fundamental importance of the President of the United States is to secure and defend the border of the country. He is not doing it. Not that he's running the country, because I think Obama is with the headpiece on in a basement, but that's another subject. But this is serious. This is affecting people's lives. The fentanyl that's coming over, etc., Matt. I can't underline it enough. This is the biggest crisis I think that you have seen in for years and years and years, and this has to be stopped. It's how is the big issue.
You know, you mentioned sharing one-on-one. I mean, that's what, as Christians, we're supposed to do, share one-on-one. And I do. I think that is the solution, person to person to person to person. And, you know, as a small town of 300 wakes up and a town of 250,000 wakes up, the country shifts. And even in cities right now, they know something is horribly wrong. And we're seeing dramatic shifts in votes right now, even here in Spokane.
Yes, well, absolutely, and also with what we've just seen on our television screens in New York, and how sadly certain young people have behaved, etc., in Chicago a few months ago as well. People are seeing the reality of this, and the thing is, it is at times very difficult to keep calm. It's not about overreacting. But you cannot deny the facts that you are seeing in front of you.
No, you can't. Mark Sutherland, where can people go to follow what you're doing and to stay informed with the Sutherland Report?
That's very kind. Well, you can find the Sutherland Report online, and then it's marksutherland.org. My little film, Between Lambs and Lions, is on YouTube, and it seems to be gaining traction again, along with the Iris Echo. So you can find me there. You can find me on that dreadful thing called Facebook, but I'd rather stay annoy them. So that's where you can find me. So thank you, Matt. It's been lovely to be able to speak to you on this side of the pond for once, my dear friend.
Amen. And perhaps we'll see each other soon. I don't know. God bless you. And thanks, Mark. Keep up the fight.
Thank you, Matt.
Mark Sutherland, marksutherland.org, marksutherland.org, and you can check out the Iris Echo and also the Sutherland Report, a British perspective that really sheds light on what we should be looking at for freedom. And I love the fact that he's talking from, just visiting a small town, and you see this happening, playing out right then. But the caveat to that, and what I was really at least encouraging to me is, wait a minute, suddenly people started standing up. You can't shut somebody's water off. And oh, by the way, we grew up with those folks. So for me, that is the key lesson out of all of this. As we come together at the local level, we will see things change. And we're seeing it already in primary elections around the country. 2024 is setting up to be, and this is not overplayed, it's not overstated. This is a turning point in American history. And if we want to see this republic continue, then we're going to go in the right direction and turn away from these failed policies of socialism, failed policies of communism. We're going to recognize who our real enemies are. We're going to recognize who our real friends are and start reclaiming this republic and making America great again. And I'm not just throwing that slogan out there. America is exceptional. God created this country to be an exceptional country, to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ and the kingdom around the world, to send missionaries out, to give hope and be a light on a hill. That's what America is about. And I hear people all the time say things like, America wasn't, founded on God. And yet in 1607, quite literally, this country was dedicated by a pastor at Cape Henry to Jesus Christ. And the Declaration of Independence. I mean, aside from the fact that Thomas Jefferson went to church regularly, which is never talked about, and he was not a deist as a matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence specifically said our entire system is founded on the law of nature and nature's God, which has a legal implication, meaning the Bible and God's truth written into creation. And that came from Sir William Blackstone. So let's be who God has created us to be and stand on his promises. This is Matt Shea. Thank you so much for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you. He is making this generation the greatest one. The awakening is here. Keep up the fight.